What is up guys, it's your boy Solam here, back with another Classic WoW video for the fresh Classic WoW servers. Now today we're going to be talking about the best class to play for these fresh Classic servers, and I really want to start this video off by saying, play the class you want to play the spec you want to play, and don't let the meta affect your choices too much. Whatever you think will bring you the most fulfillment, the most enjoyment, that should be the class you want to play. If you just hear right now, Classic Fresh, which class is the first one you think about? There you go. Now, with that being said, certain classes do have certain strengths and weaknesses, and we are not going to fully deep dive into the meta and everything today, but I will be talking about what I think are the best class choices and why I think they are good. Now, for this, I am not just talking about endgame, I'll be talking about leveling, endgame, grouping, solo content, and a little bit of everything when I'm ranking these classes. Now I will also say we're using a tier list for this, and everything here will be very subjective, so your opinion might be completely different than mine, so let me know if I made any mistakes according to you in the comments down below, and what your tier list would look like, and why. Alright, let's get right into it then, shall we? So here we have a blank tier list, and we'll be ranking the classes from S tier all the way down to D tier, and we'll be doing every single class in the Classic WoW universe. I do want to say that this will be aimed at the Classic era servers, the fresh ones that is, so like regular Classic, not hardcore, and the reason why I want to specify that is that some classes will be way better in a hardcore environment, simply due to a big part of the hardcore challenge is getting yourself to level 60 without dying a single time. So as an example here, warriors would be S tier in regular Classic WoW, meanwhile in hardcore they might go down to A tier, because even though they still perform the best in hardcore as well when it comes to raids, group content, even in solo content they can be very good, but the obvious drawbacks here is the lack of survival, the lack of self-healing, and the lack of defensive abilities, and just like the lack of being able to get out of dangerous scenarios. Meanwhile, a rogue would be lower S tier usually, and is absolutely top S tier, for example, in hardcore, because they have sprint, evasion, vanish, blind, you have cheap shot, you have gouge, you have so many things to help you get away. So once again, regular Classic WoW, PvP servers, and PvE servers. Now let's start this off with the obvious, which is warriors getting S tier once again. When you think about one class in Classic WoW, warriors usually tends to come in mind, because they're just so good. Warriors are really good at the game, they just like, they smash buttons, they do top DPS, and even in PvP, they just absolutely demolish. And when it comes to leveling in Classic WoW, warriors are actually quite good, because we are not doing solo self-found here. You can do group content, and if you have a melee cleave inside dungeons, for example, you can get really quick experience per hour, and level up really quickly. In addition to that, warriors can tank dungeons, even in DPS specs, and overall, warriors do tend to have a pretty good time in Classic WoW in general. Now, that being said, leveling can be maybe like the most gruesome part as a warrior, because as a warrior you scale really well with gear, and especially in a fresh environment, you can't just buy yourself blue BOEs. If you, for example, could buy yourself a blue BOE for level 20 or something, that could give you a significant DPS increase, and as a warrior you have two big spikes when you really feel powerful. Number one, when you get to level 60 and you literally have a really good gear, so pre-raid abyss or actual raid abyss as well, and number two is one you will feel while you're leveling, which is if you get Whirlwind Axe at a low level. Think level 30 or like low 30s and getting the Whirlwind Axe. That will also make you feel really powerful. Warriors are really dependent on gear, and in a fresh environment you will not have that gear all the time, and then you might feel a little bit weak, but overall warriors are definitely S tier in Classic WoW. Next up then we have hunters, and I'm gonna choose to give hunters the A tier here for a couple of reasons. Like, they could go both higher, they could go lower. Well, I'm gonna say they couldn't really go higher. I think A tier is a top for them, and if you only think about raiding, they might be lower down on the scale, like B tier perhaps, but overall in Classic WoW I think they're an A tier, and number one, they're really easy and fun to level with. You get aspect of the cheetah at level 20, I believe, so you can start moving around really fast and get a kind of a small mount or mount-ish speed, where you just move around really fast, you start leveling really fast. In addition to that, at level 10 you get your own personal tank through a bear or like a pet that you can then tame a bear and have a tank, it can taunt for you, and it's just so easy to level up as a hunter. In addition to that, hunters can solo rare mobs in the open world. They can literally solo and drag elites around. People have been dragging Terramus, for example, from blasted lands, and kite him across different zones. As a hunter, the possibilities here are endless when it comes to kiting and just solo farming dangerous mobs that most classes will not be able to solo, but you can. You also have Dire Maul. When that becomes available, you can farm a hefty amount of gold as a hunter. Next up then, we have another class that I think should go into the S tier, and that is Mage. And this one is once again not just focused on raiding, this is focused on the entirety of Classic WoW. Mages are a good pick, and if you play a warrior, for example in Classic WoW, chances are you will have a mage as a gold-making alt character, or a lot of people will be leveling up a mage first, to then boost themselves later down the line. Mages are very good for gold farming, AoE boosting, AoE farming, and you can even farm inside raids. Remember the Set G or Sulgurub AoE farm, Maraudon AoE farm, Sulfarok AoE farm. Mages are just great for everything about AoE farming. They can also make portals, they can make food, they can make drinks. Overall, a mage is a very solid choice. I'm just gonna say, when it comes to raids, you will not have that many raid spots compared to how many mages there are. But then again, most people do have a mage alt for the farming aspect. But in a raid setup, for example, let's just say you have 20 warriors in that raid. You will likely have 3 mages, maybe 4, depending on how many dispels you actually need. Now let's go on to the next one, which is going to be the Rogue, which is another S tier choice, and I'm going to place the Rogue above the Mage in S tier, so we have Warrior, Rogue, and then Mage. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that if you play a Rogue, there is one thing you need to be aware of, and that is that you will very likely be fighting for raid spots, and getting raid spots and even dungeon spots might be a little bit difficult, and it's not because the Rogue class is bad. Like, there's a reason why Rogues are S tier, but there are generally too many rogues in Classic WoW compared to how many raid spots they actually get. When it comes to raids, you tend to stack way more warriors than you actually stack rogues, but being a rogue is just great. You have so many abilities that work in your favor. You even have CCs to be able to CC mobs. You can even you can CC them, you can stun them, you can kick them, so you have the kick as well. You have vanish, you have blind, you have cheap shot, you have sprint. Rogues are very good for just about everything. You even have blade flurry to deal a bunch of AoE damage as well, so they're good for AoE, they're good for single target, and rogues are a lot more fun to level as than a warrior. Like, if I'm leveling to level 60 right now, I would choose a rogue over a warrior any day of the week, just because I've leveled as a warrior, I've leveled as a rogue twice. I've leveled as a warrior once to level 50, I believe, and I didn't enjoy leveling as a warrior at all. There's one time in the leveling aspect where I enjoyed being a warrior, and that is when I had a Whirlwind Axe. Up until that point, and after that point, I didn't really enjoy it that much. As a rogue, I thoroughly enjoyed every single part of level 1 to level 60 as a rogue, but at the end game they tend to be less in demand than warriors, and once again it's just such a popular class that there's too many of them, and that is basically the only drawback that I can find to actually being a rogue. Next up we have priests. I'm going to put the priest into the A tier here, because everyone needs a priest healer. Priest healers are amazing, and especially if you're on the alliance side, playing a dwarf priest as well for the anti-fair or fair ward is absolutely huge. Priests are pretty much in demand all the time. Just be aware that if you play a priest, you will very likely be asked to heal pretty much all the time, because when it comes to group content, well, shadow priests are not really that wanted. I'm just going to say it now. Even with debuffs like the debuff limit being removed, shadow priests aren't really the DPS that most people are looking for, but a priest healer is exactly what everyone is looking for. Now, when it comes to healing as a priest, you can heal in a regular DPS spec while you're leveling, so you can spec yourself for solo single target gameplay, so spec into Wands and Shadow, get some Spirit Tap going, and still be able to heal dungeons. So you can heal as a priest with that setup and do DPS while you're questing at the same time. So it's not like if you're a paladin, you have to level as a ret but then you're healing, so you need to have a whole separate gear type of thing to be able to heal. If you heal as a ret paladin in strength gear and don't have any intellect, you will go out of mana after 2 heals. Meanwhile, as a priest, you can basically level up quest, DPS, and heal, all in the same spec and in the same gear, which is quite incredible. And at the end game, people are looking for priest basically 24/7. It's a good class to pick. Now, we just talked about paladin, so let's put paladin on the board here, and I'm going to put paladins way lower than most of you probably will have, but once again, I'm going to put this into B tier, and I'm just going to preface this by saying, this is not just about endgame. This is about how the class feels. It's about the leveling process, and it's about playing the class in general in Classic WoW. Now, some of you might disagree, that's completely fine, just let me know why you disagree in the comments, and the reason why I put paladins in the B tier is that they only really have one viable spec, and that's a healer, and if you want to level up right now, you will play as a ret. If you want to be a ret and heal, you will once again need on other types of gear. You are leveling as a ret, which is a 2-handed spec, with strength, and also plate or mail. Meanwhile, when you're healing, you will want to have intellect and spirit gear in your bags ready for that point. You can heal in a retribution specialization, but you do definitely want to have some intellect on your gear, so you don't go out of mana all the time. In addition to that, paladins do level really slow. They're usually one of the fastest levelers from level 1 to 20, and then after level 20, they tend to fall off big time, unless you're a speed leveler. Like, some people can make paladins work really well, but I mean, as a paladin, you're basically auto-attacking. There's a reason why it's the meme class, and it's the auto-attacking machine. Like, all you're doing as a ret basically while you're leveling is auto-attacking, which is not fun gameplay at all. So for those reasons, I'm putting paladin into B tier while saying that holy paladins are in demand pretty much all the time, especially for raids. People want to have those blessings, and you also bring different blessings. So you need different paladins for different blessings, and different auras as well, depending on the raid you're actually doing. So paladins will be in demand, but I still put them into B tier in this list for now. Next up then, we have warlocks, and where you put a warlock depends a little bit on which phase of the game you're actually playing in, and the same thing goes for every single class really. Like, hunters can perform really well at the start because they're not that gear dependent, meanwhile other classes scale really well with gear. So for example, in your first lockout of your raid, hunters and mages might end up topping DPS meters, or at least being quite far up there. Meanwhile, after a few weeks, rogues and warriors will close that gap and be top DPS afterwards, just talking about the endgame. Same thing goes for a warlock. They will scale differently based on different phases of the game, when they reach certain hit caps, certain crit caps, and just scaling with spell power. Now, warlocks in general are quite good, but they're also capped at how much DPS they can do, because of the threat. Like, if you're spamming Shadow Bolt, and you spam too much Shadow Bolt, or at the wrong target, or at the wrong time, you will take aggro and you will die. So as a Warlock, I want to put Warlock into A tier, but I also want to put them into B tier, and I feel like no matter where I put them here, somebody will get mad because I put them in the wrong place, so I'm going to put them into B tier, while verbally saying they could be A tier, and they could be quite far up into A tier as well. The thing is, Warlocks do bring a lot to a raid, and they also bring, for example, Summon Stones, Health Stones, decent DPS, and being a good Warlock, you can also do some, what am I trying to say? You can swap pets and do some really good mechanics by doing that. So at this point we only have 2 more classes to cover, so let's go with the one that could shock most people here, that is Druid. I'm going to put Druid into C tier, so the lowest ranked class so far, and the reasoning behind this, like, I'm just going to say it right now, Boomkin DPS is basically non-existent, even with the removal of the debuff limits, where Boomkins can finally use Moonfire, they can finally use Nature's Swarm, stuff like that, they still won't be that good, and you will still go really fast, even as a Boomkin. You will still go before you can even do any DPS, and you will struggle as a Boomkin. Now, as a Feral, you can do it decent DPS, and I mean like decent DPS as a feral, but you will be chugging mana flasks, number 1, and you have to farm the manual crowd pummeler in Nomer again every single day. And if you choose to play a feral druid and you want to actually perform inside raids, you will likely spend more time in Nomer again farming manual crowd pummelers than you will spend in the actual raid itself, and that is just to be on par with maybe a bad warrior or a bad rogue. Like, you're doing all of this work, putting in like 10 times the effort of those classes to be on par with them, to just close that gap. But ferals can be decent, I'm just going to put that right out there. Ferals can be decent, and leveling as a feral is really amazing, but when it comes to endgame, most people don't need a feral, and you will have to put in so much work as a feral as well to earn that raid spot, for example. Meanwhile, if you are a warrior, you will get that raid spot instantly. As a feral, you have to go through so many hurdles, jump through so many hoops to get that raid spot, and it just makes it very difficult to get raid spots as both feral and the boomkin. When it comes to tanking, bear tanks can be alright, and restoration druids you usually want to have 1 or 2 of them for a 40-man raid, so they are definitely in demand. It is just they're not insanely good, and when it comes to 5-man content, I believe most people would rather go with a priest or a paladin healer, or on the horde side a shaman healer, over a druid healer as an example. Now, once again, I just want to reiterate here that I'm not telling you to not play a druid, I am simply ranking the classes based on how good they are, in terms of like just how good the class is for Classic WoW, for the leveling purposes, for the endgame purposes, just for a bit of everything here. And there's one more class we haven't tried so far, and that is the class that I've played the least, so if I place this one at the wrong place, just let me know in the comments and tell me once again why I'm wrong, but that's the Shaman, and Shaman is the same as Paladin and Warlock for me, where they can be both A tier and B tier. I'm going to choose to put them into the A tier, simply because of how viable they are. As a horde player, you need shamans. Shamans enable warriors and any melee DPS through their Wind Fury, for example, their totems, and you need to have those totems. So shamans on the horde side are mandatory, and everyone wants to have a shaman in their group. If you're doing a 5-man content with a warrior, for example, they want to have a shaman there, like a shaman DPS, shaman healer, doesn't really matter that much. I would say shaman healers are usually more popular though, but you want to have that totem for melee, so warriors and rogues want to have those totems all the time. Even ranged also benefits from those totems, so shamans are really useful for their totem usage. And the thing is, while you're leveling, being a shaman feels great. I've only leveled a shaman to level 30 myself, but I thoroughly enjoyed every single step of the leveling aspect. You have things to help you out to like slow down the mobs. You have Earth Grab Totem, you also have a totem that can take aggro, Stone Claw Totem, right? You can do a Ghost Wolf to run away, you can use Frost Shock, you have Earth Shock. There's just so many things you have at your disposal to be helpful, like such a toolkit, a very good class toolkit for shamans. So I feel like because of all of those reasons, they do deserve an A tier here, just because as a horde, I feel like you want shamans there all the time. So that's basically my tier list for which classes are the best for Classic WoW across multiple aspects of the game itself. So once again, let me know how wrong I am in the comments down below, and also tell me why. Either way, that's the video, so hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I cannot wait to play Classic Fresh, which is launching in 2 days from now. Either way, thank you for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you again in the next video very soon. Bye bye now.